Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
Okay, awesome.
Thank
Hi.
you so much.
Before you start, I would like to do like an introduction for you. Um, as we all know, that today's speaker is Rachael Boyce, the ultimate powerhouse consultant, who's flipping the script on how we approach work and life. Rachel's on a mission to help women smash through barriers in business while carving out more time for what truly matters. With her no nonsense approach, she exposes inefficiencies and shows you how to reclaim your time like a boss. She's also about working smarter, not harder, so you can crush your career and live life entirely on your own terms. Get ready, Rachel's here to help you level up and me as well. So here, floor's all yours, Rachel. I'm just gonna put myself on mute and give it to
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you for the awesome introduction. As I said before, I feel like you've given me some boots to fill, but I am here for the mission. Grateful for everybody who could join us today. As Rubab mentioned, my name is Rachel. I am excited to share a little bit about my story with integrating work and life and just have an open conversation around what that means, what it looks like, and how we can implement that into everybody's lives because honestly, nobody will, have a regret over making this kind of change. Unlike work-life balance, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard before, work-life balance is implying that scales are evenly distributed between professional and personal responsibilities. And we all know that that is very rarely the case. If you're lucky, you might get 24 hours of some balance bliss until you wake up the next morning. And what is that saying? When it rains, it pours. Your hot water tank bursts, your family's sick, your last open weekend before Christmas is booked up with another event that you have to plan and prep for. All the while, your professional email inbox is filling up. Every email that comes in is just adding to your to-dos. Everyone wants to meet with you. Deadlines are approaching. It's the end of the year. There's tasks that are overdue. What ends up happening is, all of this chaos and imbalance is forcing you into survival mode. Whatever you deem to be the most urgent or whatever fire is lit gets your attention, and the scales just keep tipping further and further out of balance. This ends up resulting in, like I said before, a to-do list that just never ends and a stress level that just rises and rises and rises. I can contest, I can speak to this. As I was once a juggling circus act, I had a super demanding job that stretched way beyond an 8-hour workday regularly. I was a single parent to a small child. I had a home to take care of. I had bills to pay, family and friends that relied on me. I had to deal with the major loss of a loved one and all the grief and ugly feelings that are associated with that. I also had hobbies and interests. I should have been prioritizing self-care, but there just wasn't enough hours in the day. To sum it up, I was always tired. I was always stressed. And I rarely felt like I was doing a good job in anything. Parenting, in my personal relationships, I never felt like my home was cared for. And again, that stress level is just rising and rising and rising. After some time to reflect and understand what I was going through, I see that I was very clearly in the early stages of burnout. Everybody has those feelings sometimes. We take on too much, we get really overwhelmed, and it's all in how you manage it and what you do to break the cycle. So I knew that I had to make a change. The existence I was living was not pleasant and it was not sustainable. Everybody in my circle, my kid, my friends, my partner, everyone felt my stress. There was no way I could hide it or get away from it. It was who I was. I was a stressed human being. I was really trapped in a cycle, and the only way to break it was to step out of it and really do a hard reset. And for me, that hard reset was making some pretty significant changes. I left what most people would deem to be a super stable job with great benefits and pension. And I left that for more flexible working options that allowed me to integrate all of the areas of my life a little bit more seamlessly. Eventually, that turned into self employment, which created even more flexibility. I also had to do a little bit of a deep dive and ask myself some super scary questions like, what was my purpose? How did I want to spend my time on this earth? What are the things that bring me joy, and how do I get those back into my schedule or my routine? I journaled a lot. I sat with those answers. I reevaluated the questions I was asking myself and asked them again. I did a deep dive until I had a true understanding of the action that needed to be taken to make the change. And honestly, that very first action step was overhauling my priorities and understanding what was actually truly important to me. So, with that being said, I would love to dive into a little bit about what work life integration truly means, what it means for women, what it means in general. So, let's define it so everybody has a clear understanding. Um, Earlier, I mentioned it is unlike balance, where those scales are supposed to be evenly distributed, because that's not practical. Work life integration is a holistic approach to managing both of your responsibilities professionally and personally, with a really big focus on your overall well being. Recognizing there is no true separation between professional and personal life. There really isn't. We can pretend that we shut the other off, but we don't. In the back of our minds, we are still thinking about what needs to happen at home, whether that be with kids, with partners, things we've committed to. Those things creep into our workday, and we can absolutely have times where we're super productive and we're focused on the tasks in front of us. But at the end of the day, our life is connected. Everything is connected, and what happens at work impacts home and vice versa. For women specifically, we face some super big challenges. We are expected to juggle our professional lives, where we face inequality, sexism, discrimination, and we have to juggle that with family responsibilities, where we often carry the entire mental load of a household. We are also expected to juggle our goals, our aspirations, our educations with all of these societal expectations and pressure. What is acceptable for us to say, for us to wear, how we should be behaving. It's never ending. And what ends up happening is we put ourselves last. We put everybody else's needs first. So, this whole concept of work life integration is attempting to offer a much more realistic and sustainable approach, where professional and personal responsibilities and your lives can truly flow together. Um, it's really a mindset shift, to be honest. Instead of thinking your professional and personal lives are competing priorities where you have to shut one off to do the other, um, consider how they can support each other, just like a good partnership or a good relationship. One can build the other up, and vice versa. A fulfilling personal life honestly fuels professional success. I can speak to that wholeheartedly. When things are going really well in life and life is managed, and I feel like there's time for the things that are important to me, I show up in my professional life with energy. I have a plan. I have actions I want to take. I know what I want to accomplish, and I have the brain space emotionally, physically. I'm able to accomplish those things. It's really easy to say we would love to integrate our work and personal lives in a more fluid way, but how do we actually implement? That is, the $1 million question. What actions can we take, and what can we do to bring this integration into our lives and just feel overall wellness in all areas? So, one of the first things is understanding what is important to you. What are your priorities? You really need to identify and prioritize what matters to you. And sometimes, as I experience, that's a deep dive. That's journaling. That's asking hard questions. That's relying on your very close friends circle or your family or your partner to ask them their opinions too, based on what they see externally, what's important to you. It's important to identify and track the busy seasons in your professional and personal lives so you have some data to make informed decisions about your priority. Putting all of these things down on paper can give you a visual representation of the unique ebbs and flows throughout your week, your year. Nobody's lives are exactly the same. We all have different professional commitments and responsibilities, as well as personal responsibilities. Another thing that we can identify and track is our energy levels, how we feel productive throughout the day and throughout the month. I know for sure that I do my best work, between about 9 and 3 p.m. This is when the kids have been dropped off at school. There's minimal distractions at home. As my day goes on, like many people do, my mind starts to wander. I get closer and closer to those hours where I'm thinking about school pickup. I'm thinking about all the extracurricular activities we have booked. I'm thinking about prepping for supper. My productivity goes way down as my mind drifts off into the personal world and all of those responsibilities. So understanding when you are truly focused and the time when you can be the most productive will help you plot that into your calendar, into your days and your weeks. To capitalize on that and also to alleviate some tasks and pressure when you are least productive or when you are most distracted. I also know that on a monthly basis, I have a cycle that has a huge impact on my focus and my productivity. There are going to be a couple of days, sometimes even as long as a week, every month where I feel a little bit foggy, I'm tired, and I really need to focus more energy and time to rest and nourishment. I'm not in a decision-making mindset. These are days or a week where I can absolutely get tasks done and I can keep things moving, but I am not taking on giant projects. I am not crushing goals. I am taking care of me. And building that time in has been a game changer. Another thing that we can do is to set super clear and actionable priorities and boundaries. Every single day, we are going to get phone calls, emails, text messages, calendar invites for future things, whether they are professional or personal. It never ends. So by understanding what your priorities are, that could be family, it could be career growth, it could be starting a business. When you get those down on paper and you have a true understanding of what's important to you, you can set some pretty clear boundaries. And when the new things pop up, seeking your attention and your effort, you can look back and say, you know what? This week, I'm actually super focused on wrapping up an important project. And I honestly don't have any additional energy or time to commit to another personal event. I'm tapped out this week. The project is my priority until it's done. Or another great example is, next month is crazy. I have major family events. I have birthdays. I have medical appointments. I have a visitor from out of town. I'm going to be so focused on doing personal things that I also need to build in time for rest and to recharge. So I have to be careful about the professional commitments that I agree to coming up in the future. Maybe that means saying no to after-work networking events for a couple of weeks, or pushing a new meeting, a new project into the next month. Whatever that looks like for you, it's really being able to look forward and understand what you have happening in both areas of your life and knowing when you should really say no or say not right now. There are a lot of tools out there. Technology is our friend, and we need to embrace it to support the life that we want to design. There is an app for everything in your professional world, your personal world. Use these tools to your advantage. Streamline your tasks, manage your time better. Anytime you embrace a tool to support you, you're taking that mental load away from yourself and you're giving yourself some time back where you get to determine, what do you fill that time with? Go back to your priorities. Where could you benefit from using that time gained? It's important to use technology to our advantage. Everybody lives by calendars these days. So I'm going to encourage people, when you've identified what these priorities are for yourself, whether it's for the week, the month, the year, add these things into your calendar or any time management tool, project tool that you use to stay organized. That is super important, and it will hold you accountable. Oh yeah, I remember I have dedicated this week to a professional project that's really important to me. So I do need to say no or try to move a personal request into the next week or the week after that. Something else that we can do to really implement this integration holistically, we need to delegate. We need to ask for help. I am a fearlessly independent woman, and I struggle to put my hand up and say, I need help. It is so uncomfortable for me. It feels like failure. But I have changed that mindset, and I am learning that asking for help and delegating is actually a superpower. Because when we get those things out of our minds and we ask for help from our support system, again, it's freeing up time for the things that actually matter to us. Maybe it's freeing up time for rest. Maybe it's freeing up time for exercise. Maybe you actually get to go for that lunch with your partner or your best friend and catch up because now you've delegated something that needs to get done to somebody else that you are confident can handle the task. Again, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's uncomfortable, and I will struggle with this for the rest of time, but I will always remind myself it is a superpower. It is not a weakness. Another important piece to this integration is reminding yourself that self-care is not selfish. Self-care is the building block to the quality of life you're looking for. It's the building block to a smooth integration between both your professional and your personal life. If we are unwell, that trickles down into every area, every relationship. We really need to take those reins back and put ourselves first. It can mean having a quiet coffee by yourself while you read a book. It could mean implementing more exercise and outdoor activity into your life. Or maybe it's just some quiet time in the evenings to do whatever you want. Investing in your mental health and your physical well-being is essential. It's a non-negotiable. And at some point, we put it on the back burner. And then it comes back full circle. In burnout, we experience extreme stress and burnout because we're not prioritizing ourselves. So even though everyone's priorities are different, I think the number one priority needs to be you. And then you can go down the list to understand what else is a priority, whether it's your family, career, education, things of that nature. As you go through this journey to implement a more holistic integration between your priorities, you're absolutely going to face some challenges. And I've touched on them already. But one of the major ones I think everybody experiences, myself included, is a huge feeling of guilt. We as women, and not just women, but especially women, we feel guilty when we put ourselves first. When we need to step away from work for a personal appointment or personal commitment, if we need to step away from our families or our partners because we have a looming deadline, in any direction we go, we feel guilty that we can't do it all and be present in all areas. But the truth is that taking care of yourself is not just good for you, it's good for everybody else around you. That guilt that you feel is a subconscious voice inside of you, and it's not always telling you the truth. You do need to take care of yourself. And when you do take care of yourself, everybody else around you feels that impact. And eventually you can retrain yourself and reframe that negative talk, and that guilt, that voice in your head will get quieter and quieter and quieter until eventually, hopefully, that feeling of guilt goes away entirely. And it's more like, yes, I've put myself first. I feel great. And then that feeling of joy and, being proud that you can do all these things, that takes over. I will absolutely say too, productivity through the roof when we put ourselves first and we have a more holistic integration between all of our priorities. And productivity going through the roof is really just buying you your time back. The less time you spend doing all of your tasks and to-dos on both sides of things, the more time you get back for yourself for those priorities that we've deemed are super important. We as women struggle also to say no. We overcommit ourselves. We are quite often people pleasers. I know I certainly am. And I struggle to say no because it's honestly easier to say yes and keep the peace. We have this internal dialogue that tells us, oh, if we say no, somebody will be mad at me, somebody will not like me, they may not reach out to me for further support or give me further projects, or, if I say no to a client right now, they may never come back to me. We have all these internal fears and a dialogue, again, that is really negative. And so we tend to say, yeah, we overcommit ourselves, we overfill our calendars. Again, just adding to the to-do list and to that feeling of burnout. You don't always have to have a hard no. Sometimes I can't do this right now is the most effective route. And it feels better too, because we're not shutting somebody down. We're just reprioritizing our time. I can't say yes to lunch with you this week, but next week, absolutely. I can't say yes to taking on a new client or project. I am super overwhelmed, but next month, things have cleared up for me, and I would love to reconnect and revisit that opportunity next month. You really need to identify what your values and priorities are so that you can set those boundaries in place and learn to say no and learn to not overcommit your time. There's only so many hours in a day, and we're supposed to spend 8 of the 24 resting and sleeping. So that's really cutting down how much time we have left to commit to all of the areas that need us, all the tasks, all the people, all the responsibilities. And somewhere in that 24 hours, we're also supposed to build in joy, happiness, things we love. It is a lot, and overcommitting ourselves is really doing a huge disservice to us. And that is now trickling down through our stress to everybody else in our lives. And we're not completing the tasks and projects that we hoped we did in the quality we want to either. So now we're letting ourselves down. That's all tied together with this idea of perfectionism. I know that as I go through this journey of continuing to integrate what's important to me, my work life, my personal life, my family, and all the demands, I had to let go of the idea that everything had to be perfect. Oh my gosh, what a hard lesson to learn. Perfection is a paralyzing feeling. You need to accept that a lot of things do not need to be done perfectly. They can be done and you can move on. It's okay that things are good enough. You need to prioritize moving the ball forward and your progress over everything being absolutely perfect. Our entire lives, we are learning. We are constantly evolving and changing and learning new ways of doing things. It's the same in your personal life, in your work life, when it comes to getting tasks done or completing to-dos. We can always learn how to do something better for next time, but we don't need to burn ourselves out trying to finish something and make it absolutely perfect the first time we do it. A good example of this for me in my personal life centers around functioning of our home, shared laundry, dishes, cleaning the house. We have a lot of kids. And at this point, we are delegating tasks to kids to help us with that load at home. So I had asked our teenager to fold some of our towels that the entire family uses. And I'm not going to lie to you, the towels look ugly. They are not folded how I would fold them. In my brain, the perfectionist in me is like, no, they all have to be folded the exact same way. They need to look uniform. Nobody else looks in my linen closet but me. Nobody externally comes in my house and says, let me see what that closet looks like. No one cares. It's just me. So I've had to learn that it doesn't matter what the towels are folded like. They're clean and they're put away. And when I need a clean towel, it's irrelevant how it's folded. When the dishes get put away by somebody other than me, if they don't go in the right spot, there's no impact there. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I've offloaded and delegated some tasks to free up my own mental space for other things that are super important to me. And I've had to let go of some of those somewhat neurotic perfectionist qualities. And that is a lifelong lesson. I will probably continue to struggle with that, just as I struggle with saying no. But it's a very beneficial concept to just let that go. Not everything needs to be perfect. There are so many ways that we can work on implementing a more holistic work and life integration, but it really comes back to priorities. We're not trying to maintain a balancing act. Nobody here is a circus juggler. If I'm wrong, please put your hand up and tell me that you are in fact a circus juggler, but that's not me. I'm not meant to juggle multiple balls. If I did, they would all be on the floor. And that is how I started this journey. I did feel like a circus juggler and I was dropping all the balls and it made me feel really bad, like I wasn't successful in any areas of my life. So this concept of work-life integration is more about making choices hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, that align with our values and integrate our well-being. Our well-being is the center of this entire concept, because when we are cared for and when we feel well, we crush it everywhere, in every area. People feel it when they talk to us. So you have to remember that you are the one in control here. You're in the driver's seat. I recognize that for those of us who are employed, it's very hard sometimes to understand how to get the flexibility you need out of your employment arrangement. But if you back it up a little bit, it's all about understanding your own priorities and your values and, maybe mapping that out, whether it be on a piece of paper or in your calendar. The first step is understanding so that you could go to a manager or supervisor and say, hey, this week or next month, these are the things going on in my world. And here's a few ideas that I have to help me integrate those things more smoothly. Nowadays in the workplace, there is a lot more flexibility with work from home arrangements. A lot of employers understand, if you have children or other really big commitments, it's okay if you need to take an hour or two out of your day, as long as you get the tasks done. Understanding when you're most productive can be challenging sometimes too to implement into an employment arrangement. But again, with that flexibility becoming more and more popular, that does sometimes allow for people to step away from work do the things that are, important to them from their personal life. And then maybe that means you are finishing up a project or sending a few emails later in the day, because now you've freed up that time and you've found a way to get everything done while still feeling really good. So again, this whole approach is more focused on your holistic well-being. We all have a huge to-do list. We all have personal demands. We all have professional demands. But what action steps can we take to create a smoother integration and step off that hamster wheel? Put the juggling balls down. This is our lives, and we need to take control back to create a more holistic integration. And this is something you will have to work at and work at and work at. But I can tell you personally, it's worth the work. It's worth constantly analyzing what the priorities are. And if they change, that's okay too. So I will leave you with this question. What is going to be your first step in taking action to create that smoother integration? And if anybody's feeling brave enough, I would love for you to put it in the chat. You could send a message to me on LinkedIn and we can keep the conversation going. But I'm going to challenge you. What is that first step that you're going to take? If anybody has questions, I would be happy to jump into some Q&As. I have a few ideas on some, activities that everybody could do to kind of map out what that work and life integration looks like, how to map out your priorities using calendars, papers, tools. But again, I'm happy to chat with everybody on a one-on-one basis and, see what makes sense for you.
I'm back. I can start with some of the Q&A that came through. Okay. First question is some of the tools that you can recommend for something that you have used before, or something that prioritize and then have that balance.
Yeah. So I had considered sharing with you. I'm a paper girl. I love to write things on paper. I love to draw pictures. I like graphs. I like data, visual representations of whatever it is that I'm trying to figure out or change. So I think one of the easiest tools that you could use is a piece of paper. Start simple. Have a piece of paper. Put four quadrants that represent the seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall, and get 2 different markers, 2 different colors. One's going to represent your personal responsibilities, commitments, things are going to be happening in your year, and the other's going to represent professional. We all have ebbs and flows in both areas. So depending on the nature of your work and what you do, there's going to be busy seasons where work is really demanding, whether it be around budgets, it could be around hiring, it could be around projects. Go back to last year, look in your calendar and start plotting those on your piece of paper. Write down, okay, I know that from spring and summer, I'm really focused doing these 5 different things. Once you've plotted out a lot of those professional responsibilities, go to the personal side of things. Go back to your personal calendar. Make sure you include things like self-care, extracurriculars. Maybe you play sports at a certain time of the year. Maybe there is a season for you where it's crazy focused on personal life. Like for me, fall is a hard time for me. It's back to school. It's holidays, it's birthdays, never-ending personal things. So I know for me, based on this piece of paper, that fall has a lot of personal responsibilities and things that I'd like to get done. So I try really hard not to overcommit professionally in those 3 months. And when something new does come up in my professional world that is important and big, I truly try to dive into it to understand what is the time commitment? Is this feasible based on the fact that my personal life is peaking. I have dedicated so much time to, extracurricular sports, preparing my home for winter, car maintenance, dentist appointments. Like the list never ends. Right now, I was thinking about planning my son's 10th birthday party before this event started. So I already know that for me, fall is a really busy time personally. Um, for others in business, I know that, spring can be really busy. The beginning of summer can be really busy. It's all about plotting down those peaks, those ebbs and flows in both areas. Because when you have that visual representation, oh my gosh, look at summer. So for me, let's say I chose red as my professional marker. My summer, it could be all red, and maybe I just don't have a lot of time for some personal things. So now you can use this tool to be able to say, yes, I can commit to this. No, I can't commit to this, or I can't commit to this right now. If paper is not your thing and you're more of a calendar digital person, I'm going to say use your calendar. I have a Google Calendar with family commitments. I have a Google Calendar that has like bills and important money related things. And then I have my regular Google Calendar that just has the events and the meeting invites and the requests. When I layer all of those on top of each other, it gives me a really good picture of what my weeks and my months are going to look like. And it helps me forecast ahead. What do I have on the go? And is it more heavily leaning to my professional world or my personal world? So again, data is your friend. There are a lot of really great project management tools out there. And even if you're not working in a project management space, you can use a free version of these tools like Asana, for example, where you can plot in some things that you have on the go on both sides, which will allow you to get a good picture of, the upcoming seasons and be able to put in those boundaries. Data is your best friend, and everything nowadays lives up here for us. So any way that we can get that stuff out of our head and into software, into a system, onto paper, it's alleviating that pressure to keep it all inside, and it's giving us a visualization, some real data to work with, to plan ahead. We need to plot in rest. We need to plot in self-care. That should almost be its own marker, and it should automatically be plotted into every quarter, every season, or every week. Because again, if we don't put ourselves first, we're not going to be successful in all of these other areas. And it's going to take redefining those priorities a little bit to be able to go through that exercise. And you may find that you have to do the exercise 4 different times, because as you identify your priorities, they actually evolve and change. It's uncovering hidden things, hidden priorities, goals, things that you want to accomplish that maybe sit in that back burner tab of your brain. But now we want to bring them out, and we want to find a way to accomplish it all and feel like we're living our best life and designing the life that works for us. So I would encourage you, rely on your calendars, rely on tools, software management tools. There's little things that can really make a huge difference. Like, for example, there's an app for grocery shopping. Who knew? I used to be a girl that would write my grocery list on a piece of paper. And if I lost that piece of paper, oh my gosh, I was buying whatever I felt like eating when I went to the grocery store. But now I've let an app take care of that. So no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I need laundry soap. It takes me about 6 seconds to open my app, plot in my laundry soap, shut it, and never think about it again until I show up at the grocery store. So any technology you can embrace, I will encourage you to do so. But I think it is really specific to the tools you already use and your comfort level. Many people have a paper scheduler or journal. A lot of people rely on digital. So it's really just about, your comfort with technology and the tools that you work with best. But get it out of here. Don't leave it in your mind, because you can't prioritize and organize up here by yourself. You just can't. You really do need that visual representation to see your peaks and your lulls. And, this is busy season personally, this is busy season professionally, so that you can plan ahead. Planning is your friend.
Okay, we have a comment here, but I'm just checking if Jay would like to speak up or leave a message while I get a response on that. I'm just gonna move to another question. Do you have any tips to how to say no without feeling guilty?
Whew, that is some internal work. That feeling of guilt, that is your subconscious programming that you have never really pulled out before. You don't really understand where it comes from, but it lives deep in here. Getting rid of that guilt is hard. I journal a lot. I rely on my close circle, my best friend, my partner. It's really helpful to, again, get that out of your mind and speak it aloud. Acknowledge the feeling. Sometimes that's all feelings need, is to be seen, heard, and to allow a little bit of space for the feeling to exist. And sometimes it will pass when you allow it the space to exist for a moment and you acknowledge it. You will have to keep working at that. You will have to constantly remind yourself, I should not feel guilty for setting priorities and boundaries that work for me. Maybe you need to say it out loud. Maybe you need to write it on your mirror like an affirmation. I will not feel guilty for saying no and refusing to overcommit myself. Maybe for you, you need to tie it back to a result, because everybody's brain is a little bit different, right? So if I say no and I feel really guilty, so then I'm like, oh, you know what? I should probably just say yeah and take this on. What is the result of that? The result is stress, completing something that isn't done very well and not feeling good about it. There's so many negative results to overcommitting yourself that it's really easy to understand, okay, you know what? This guilt isn't valid. This guilt is the way that I'm programmed based on conditioning and previous behavior. But the whole point of this concept is to change that cycle, to break out of it. We don't want to feel guilty anymore. So I would encourage everybody to acknowledge that feeling. And that guilty feeling could come from the smallest of asks. Maybe your partner wants to go, I don't know, for a walk, and you're like, whew, just can't do it right now. Doesn't seem like a big deal to be like, nope, can't do it. But you still have that feeling of guilt arise. So then maybe the conversation is, nope, can't do it. Ugh, it made me feel really guilty to say that. But here's why I'm saying it. Connect those feelings together, because eventually you're going to retrain yourself and retrain that, subconscious voice to realize that you have permission to say no. It is your life. This is your boundary. These are your priorities. So guilt is that feeling that we get because we feel like we're letting somebody else down. But if you put yourself back in the driver's seat and you become your priority again, your no is actually you setting a boundary and being able to fulfill all of the other commitments that you've already said yes to. So acknowledge that guilt, acknowledge that feeling, and give it space for a minute. But then connect those dots. I feel guilty because of this. If I had just said yes and overcommitted myself, here's how I would feel. And that would probably be worse than a moment of guilt. You have to constantly work at it and constantly acknowledge those feelings. And again, like however that resonates with you, if you need to write it on a piece of paper, I will not feel guilty for saying no. Or you need to write it on the mirror. I will not feel guilty for saying no. I have to put myself first. Take those action steps because you need to see it. You need to hear it to change. Just like forming a hobby takes 21 days, forming a new inner voice or a new way of doing things. You have to do something or say something in a pattern over and over and over again before it sticks. So acknowledge the feeling, get it out, say it, talk about it with somebody that you trust, that you feel comfortable with, until you've changed that programming. And eventually, over time, that feeling of guilt will last for a shorter and shorter and shorter period, with the hope that it just doesn't arise at all anymore, or at least very, very minimally.
Thank you. I think part of what someone asked is what you were talking about. They mentioned about the energy levels that you also mentioned. And they said that my energy level is good enough around 12 at noon or even later. So at that time, I will be really productive and aware. Is that okay? I always criticize myself. And then the follow up comment is, and do you have any tips for continuous self criticism? Like all the time and every single second. So can absolutely relate to that. But
Yeah, absolutely. Productivity is really an individual thing. We all have our own internal clocks. We all have our own internal systems. There are people who are, night owls and can sit in the evening from 6 till midnight and get their entire workload done because they have that flexibility. And that is when they are fresh. That is when they thrive. There are people, pardon me, who are not like that, who are polar opposite, who wake up at 6 a.m. and they are full of zest, full of energy. From 6 till noon, it's like, okay, this is my time to crush it. And then from noon onwards, that decreases, that productivity decreases. So I don't think there is a right or wrong time for your productivity. I think it's tapping into your own rhythm and understanding what that productivity looks like for you. And for people who are employed, who go to a workplace, who have supervisors and managers, if you can do the work to understand your own ebbs and flows in productivity and your own internal routine, then you can take that to your manager or supervisor and just have an open conversation. I'm not saying that you're going to switch your work schedule and start working from 6 p.m. until midnight, but getting that out in the open will hopefully allow for you and your manager to create a little bit more flexibility. Or, maybe there's an understanding that during your workday, peak productivity is about half of your work time, and the rest of the time you're just keeping the boat afloat. You're really just there to click accept or send an email, and nothing important is getting done, which could mean building out a different schedule. Maybe that means you could go and do some work from home. From a self-employment perspective, people who work for themselves and own businesses, they're at their own hub of creating their schedules. So understanding those productive times in your day and in your week allow you to say yes or no to things that come up based on timing, and to push things into the productive period that really need that focus. Whereas maintaining things and doing monotonous tasks, maybe those are things that can happen in the less productive periods. That self-criticism is something I think a lot of us absolutely go through. Again, I come back to that subconscious programming, our ugly inner voice that is always saying nasty, negative things. But that's not true. That voice is, I think my best friend recently put it this way. That voice is like your college roommate. You need a roommate to share in the living and the expenses. But if that roommate ever spoke to you the way that your internal dialogue speaks to you, you would evict it. You would not take that. That is abuse. So we need to recognize the way that we are talking about ourselves, the way that we are feeling about ourselves, and we need to give ourselves a bit of a break. That self-criticism also comes from that need to be perfect, perfectionism. There's a lot of things in life that just don't need to be perfect. They really don't. Nobody's looking. Nobody cares. I can tell you right now that nobody else in my house cares what the towels look like in the closet. And if they don't care what the towels look like inside my house, nobody outside my house is even thinking about it. So why am I losing my mind over small things that honestly don't matter? I need to ditch that need to be perfect and understand what areas, have a little bit more flex where I can be less perfect and just get things done. We are our own worst critics. We are our own worst enemies. But how we speak to ourselves and how we deal with those ugly inner voices has a big impact. So just like I talked about acknowledging that feeling of guilt, if you're always criticizing yourself and you're always beating yourself up over things, you need to acknowledge it. You need to get it out. You need to speak it. You need to put it down in a journal. Talk about it with somebody you trust. Because the more we get it out and the more we acknowledge it, the more we can figure out how to change the way we talk to ourselves. And that sometimes is literally looking in the mirror and saying, I don't need to be perfect. What I did was actually a really good job. Again, you just need to get it out there and acknowledge it.
Last question. So I'm it feels like they are in their early stages of career and they do not have a lot of resources to delegate. What can I do to prioritize myself? Do I become a part of hustle culture now? Love that. For more balanced future.
That's a very individual thing. I will say that it's all based on your individual priorities. And if you are the center of priorities and you need to get back to prioritizing you, it's honestly a boundary thing. Boundaries come into play huge. When we are employees and we work for other people, there's challenges there because we don't always create our own schedule. We are expected to do or, be somewhere at a certain time, and it can be challenging to put yourself first in those environments. But there are still opportunities. That is using your lunch break for exercise, fresh air. That is eating healthy, making sure you prioritize sleep. Hustle culture, I hate it. I hate that term. I think it's awful. It is implying that you're like stuck in this crazy hamster wheel of always having to work really hard. But I will say, as somebody who works for themselves, does contract work, I've chosen that route because my priority has been my family. We have a lot of kids. Kids are only young for a small period of time. So I've made the decision for myself that this is their time in life. And if being self-employed or doing contract work and being a business owner allows me to create my own flexibility, my own schedule, and it gives me the freedom to say yes or no without seeking approval from anybody else, that's what works for me. But I want you to know, like, I am not in the hustle culture. I'm ready to work hard. I bring energy to the things that I do, but I am slowing down, not speeding up. And that's my priority. I want to live a more simple, quiet life because when I go the opposite direction, I face burnout and stress. Right now, my personal life and my family life is the most important thing to me, and time is really valuable to me. So I have chosen a route to earn money to live that is a little bit more flexible. But I am not engaging in this whole idea of hustle culture. I don't want to grind. I'm not a gear. I'm a human and I need nourishment and sunlight and water and joy. And it just so happens I also need money to be able to pay to live. So I have found a way to create that flexibility, but it's a very unique journey. You need to understand the skills you have, the priorities you face, and figure out a way to kind of integrate all of those things. If you are a person who is very focused on career and business, and that is your priority, well, then maybe, going a little bit harder, doing a little bit more will allow you some more flexibility in the future, right? Maybe what you do now will impact what happens next year or the year after to allow you to kind of build that into your 5-year plan, let's say, and create more flexibility. But it really depends on what those priorities are. You have to do a deep dive and you have to ask yourself those uncomfortable questions about your purpose and what you want to do and how you want to spend your days. It's a little bit, not a positive question to ask yourself, but like, hey, on my deathbed, am I going to have regrets? What am I going to regret? I am never going to regret working a few extra hours. I am never going to be like, darn, I really wish I would have taken that meeting. I really wish I would have worked the extra 10 hours of overtime. That's not my priority. I would regret not spending time with my family and taking care of myself. So again, that comes back to that whole holistic approach where well-being is the center of it, right? And based on what your priorities are, that well-being can look a little different. If your priorities are to make some career growth, to further your education, to start a business, well, there's some aspect of working really, really, really hard that needs to happen to achieve those things. But then you need to understand how the personal life will integrate into that so that you still have time for your personal life and those areas that matter to you. And you're also making sure to take care of yourself while you're climbing that ladder or building your business or crushing those projects.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everybody who shared their experiences in the chat. We went through everything. And then I just wanted to say that we definitely wanted not to have like a presentation format. And thank you, Rachel, for, just making it a conversation and then I wanted to say it from the very beginning. I love the statement on the t-shirt, be brave, be bold, be kind. I hope we all could experience that through your presentation. That being
Wonderful.
said, I'm going to turn the presentation off, the mode off, and give you all some time to chat and then also network. Please, I have left Rachel's information in the chat. Feel free to connect after the presentation. And thank you so much for being a part of today's event. Have a
Wonderful.
lovely day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.